That is the stupidest thing that I've heard in weeks, postulated by Will, who didn't take 5 seconds to look into whether or not intersex was a sex.
Andrew Wilson dives deep into the contradictions surrounding modern gender theory. With sharp logic and real world biological facts, Andrew Wilson questions the idea of gender being just a feeling, exposes the flaws in the gender spectrum argument, and absolutely destroys the claim that intersex is a third sex. From the made up definitions to the crumbling logic of his opponents, Andrew Wilson picks apart every argument with confidence and clarity. Let's break it down.
My opener, again, very brief. The they, them, we, us, Zer, Zy, pers want us to believe the dumbest thing on earth. That is that the Zy, per, Zer is a category which conveys something that isn't complete gibberish. You see, in order to be a Z, they, Zy, Zer, you must simply feel as a Zer, Zy, Zer would feel. What does that feel like? Who knows? Because even if you have the exact same behavior pattern as every Zer, Zy, per on planet Earth, if you identify as a they, them, or we, us, the Zy, Zers, or Z, pers have to admit you are one of the they, thems, or we, us's, and not a Zy, Zer, per Z, right? Here is what this means. It just means that the category of gender doesn't really tell us any information that we can follow coherently. Imagine if we had a chart, like a genderbread chart. And this chart had every category behavior of what is female and what is male, which, of course, that genderbread chart couldn't have. And it couldn't have it because you can't actually make a chart like that. If such a thing could exist, let's say theoretically, then I would just kind of like to know, what would it be pointing at? What's it pointing at on either end of the spectrum? It's going to be pointing to male. It's going to be pointing to female. When you say there's a spectrum, what's on either end of this spectrum, right? It's a binary. And so what they do is they put a decimal point inside the binary and try to pretend like this creates some sort of spectrum where there isn't one. Okay. Imagine if we had this chart and this could exist. This technically could exist. It can't. It can't exist. And I'll explain why. This gentleman you can see him doing like the destiny triangles. He can't really tell you what's going to belong inside of this list. Like if a man wears a dress, does that make him more of a woman? He would say, well, yeah, sure. If he feels like it. If a man has a purse, does that make him more of a woman? Well, sure. If he feels like that. If a woman is wearing, pants, does that make her more of a man? Well, sure, if she feels like that. Meaning that you can have somebody who has every single one of these categories, right, and says, I don't feel like that, and they aren't. Or a person who has every single one of those categories and says, I do feel like that, and they aren't. That's why it makes no sense. It's complete gibberish. Imagine, for instance, they say trans rights, right? Pep Talks TV says trans rights aren't human rights. When somebody says that, it makes Pep Talks upset. But why? Why? You're talking about a fictitious category, not people. So, like, your opponents aren't talking to you about a category that they believe is even real. When we say, so this is where you live in what's called equivocation, right? Both of you live in equivocation. Because you believe that this categorization is real, you say that that's a proper human category. And we just basically say, but wait, that's not a proper human category. We still see these people as human. We just don't see that category as being valid. That's where the great equivocation comes in. They say gender is a spectrum. Gender and sex is an oversimplification, or shouldn't be an oversimplification. That's what the genderbread, which, by the way, they don't even use the genderbread anymore because it's outdated. And here's some of the reasons why it's outdated. He says an oversimplification or can't be an oversimplification. Remember, inside the nuance, what he really is claiming here is that it's just a feeling. Gender is a feeling. That's it. Well, but then he goes on to say, but it's very nuanced and complex. Well, no, the fuck it isn't. It's just how I feel. Now, but if you say that, it opens you up to all sorts of ridicule, right? For instance, if I say, oh, well, I don't feel that you're that thing you feel like you are. Why am I wrong? Well, because I don't feel like you should feel like I shouldn't feel that way, right? It leaves you open to all sorts of criticisms that make zero sense, right? They say a person's inner opinion about themselves is what he says for the genderbread theory. There is no wrong answer, he says. So there can't be a wrong answer then about how I identify them. That can't be wrong. Do you understand? Like, If you say there's no wrong way, remember in his opening statement, quote, it's a person's interfeeling opinion about themselves. There's no wrong answer. Then there can't be a wrong answer about how I feel about their identity. Do you understand? It's the same thing. Gender doesn't have to match sex, he says. Well, yes, it does, because these are the two ends we're using for actually making these categorizations to begin with. They say sex is a spectrum, but then he goes on and he makes a massive mistake. And this is one of the reasons why the genderbread theory should be thrown out. He says that there's three sexes. No, there isn't. There's no, and he'll never find a credible scientific source anywhere that'll ever call intersex a third sex. That's insanity.
Yeah, okay, this is the part where Andrew Wilson just drops the hammer. Like, seriously, he straight up challenges anyone to find a single credible science source that calls intersex a third sex. And guess what? They can't, because Andrew Wilson is right. Intersex is a condition, not a whole new sex. Like he says, there's sperm or eggs, small or large gametes. That's it. There's no medium gamete floating around out there. So, I mean, yeah, Andrew Wilson just destroys the idea that a third sex even exists with simple biology and facts. No emotion, just straight logic.
There is no third sex. Intersex isn't a sex. It refers to variations in a sex and it isn't a sex category in and of itself. It never has been. It's never been classified as one, and it still isn't. It's an umbrella term. Like, for instance, men who have their testicles shriveled due to external conditionals can be considered intersex. They're still men, right? You can't say it's a third sex. And by the way, that would bring up all sorts of problems for you if you even thought that, right? Could the third sex only breed with the third sex? Can the third sex breed with both of the other sexes? Who can the third sex have kids with? Can the third sex, oh, you know what I mean? Like, that makes no sense. They would still fall under a sex binary category for reproduction. That's why it can't be a third sex classification. That is the stupidest fucking thing that I've heard in weeks, postulated by Will, who didn't take 5 seconds to look into whether or not intersex was a sex. I want credible scientific biological classifications for intersex, which make it an actual third sex. Because to my knowledge, there's ova and there is sperm, meaning there's small gametes and there's large gametes. That's it. Is there like a medium gamete? Is there a medium gamete somewhere in there that we could classify as the third sexual gamete? That's like, what the fuck are you talking about, Will? By the way, this is why they stopped using that genderbread man in mainstream trans apologetics. You must be like out of date by a couple of years on your trans apologia, Will, because they don't even use this anymore, bro. Because of these various problems, you should get like the genderbread man 3.0 update version for trans apologia. So just pointing that out. With that, I do think it is important to be completely fair. These guys haven't been assholes yet. We're not going to be assholes to them yet, as long as they stay not being assholes. But I do think it's fair if they want to move outside even the domain of this debate of are there only two genders and get into things like transports and things like this. But we better clear up some of this stuff first to just make sure we're not even talking past each other. Because when somebody says there's a third sex, that to me sounds like the equivalent of aliens just landed on planet Earth. I mean, that is real serious breaking fucking news, ladies and gentlemen. That is something which is like an outlandishly crazy claim to say there's a third human sex. And I can't wait to hear all about it. So with that, I will yield my time over. Appreciate it.
All right, 1 minute left on the floor, so we'll end the timer there. We're going to go into an open discussion, but do want to remind the audience who's watching right now, if you haven't had an opportunity to, because it's very difficult, smash the like button, it's just waiting for you. I also put up a poll in the live chat, are there more than two genders? So let's see where that's at. 17 to 83 right now for no, so 83% on the no side. So keep your votes coming in. Let us know what you think about our debate topic tonight, and Yeah, also, we are going to do super chats at the end. So if you want to ask a question to one of our speakers, like many of the people have already, put it into a super chat and we will ask them out at the end of the debate. But with that, I'm going to set a 15-minute timer and I'll check in with you guys as long as things are moving along cogently. I'm going to hand it back over to Pep Talks to respond to some of what you just heard, and also Will. And then feel free to jump in there, Andrew and Speakeasy.
Well, can I just ask an opening clarifier, right? To
Sure.
Will. Will, who can the third sex reproduce with? Like, who can because I would think that if you
Great
say
question.
the sex can reproduce with the opposite sex, then that infers a binary. Well, so who can the third sex have sex with and have kids?
All right. So appreciate the question. So intersex is a term that is used to describe someone whose sexual and reproductive autonomy does not fit into the typical definitions of female or male. That is what intersex means.
Yeah, that's an umbrella term. It's not a third sex, though.
That is what. You don't want to call it a sex?
No. You called it a third sex. I want to know how.
Perhaps you didn't like the way I used that term. That's fine.
How do you use that term where it means something other than a sex that's not male or female?
It means your genitalia or your chromosomes do not match what you typically associate with male or female. That's what it means.
Yeah. So a deformity would be intersex?
If you want to call it a deformity, I'm not gonna
like if you were born. If you were born in a
match.
Okay, so if a horse kicks you in the balls and rips off your penis and your balls, are you now a third sex or not, Will?
Well, that depends on what you want to define sex as.
What the fuck do you mean? It depends.
Wait, I mean, if you were in Game of Thrones, technically,
how
technically
do you
they did.
Hold on a second, Will.
Sex,
hold on,
Andrew.
Will. I do want to let Pep in here as well. So over to you, Pep.
I was just saying, in Game of Thrones, technically
you're
they
a
did
third
treat
sex,
like
boys.
the ones that had their dick and balls ripped off as like a third sex, like what they call. God, I forgot what they called them.
A eunuch.
A eunuch, yeah.
Yeah, but
I mean, that was technically a third sex right there.
Not a third sex. So
kinda.
Here's what you're saying.
Think about it. It's putting them in their own category at that point, and it's like
it's not its own category. It's
Andrew,
now a man. It's now a man who has lost his penis and balls.
Yeah, but he says it himself that he doesn't consider himself a man anymore.
So,
in that way,
no. They don't say that they don't consider themselves men anymore.
He did. The spider did.
Andrew, do you define sex based on genitalia?
Hang on. Listen, Will, 1 second. Let us have our exchange. I promise we can get back into it. But I'm not going to interrupt you with your crosstalk with Speakeasy either. So just real quick on this. Do you agree with me, Pep Talks, that if a dude gets kicked in the balls by a horse and it rips off his penis and his balls, he does not become a third sex?
No, I don't agree with that.
Wait, you don't agree with it?
No, what I'm saying is I don't agree that that automatically makes them a third sex. I think that not having your dick and balls, that doesn't mean anything.
So what makes you a third sex?
Well, have like hermaphroditic tendon stuff.
Is that a third sex?
Is that not classified as a third sex?
Nope. Not even chimeras. No, not even chimeras.
See, I'm not.
I'll explain it to you.
This, so I don't know.
Hang on, I'll explain it to you. Well, it's not obsession to just know what the fuck you're talking about when you take a position on something.
Fair
right?
enough.
So even when it comes to like chimericism or things like this, it is true that this would be ambiguous, but you only have two developmental pathways, reproductive pathways, only two. And let me explain how I know that that's true, because nobody on planet Earth can impregnate themselves. Right. If you had two viable reproductive pathways, you could impregnate yourself, and nobody can.
I heard a story about this when I was like 10 years old.
And there's all sorts. Hang on, there's all sorts of tales out there about people who possibly could have or things like this. It can't be done. You cannot have, because the human body only has so much space for so many organs, and you only have two reproductive pathways you can go down. Only one of the two is ever going to be viable. That's why sex is a binary. It has to be.
Wait, so
hang on.
I'm actually asking.
Let me finish, and I'll answer.
I'm
almost done.
Hold on. Let's let Andrew put a bow on
I just want to
finish this point as well.
So really simple. Okay. There's only two developmental pathways for sex. There's no third pathway for sex. I would agree with you. If there was a third developmental pathway for sex, I would say there could be three sexes. But because there's only two developmental pathways, there can only be two sexes. You can have ambiguity inside of those two pathways.
These developmental pathways, and I keep saying, thinking,
you can only ever impregnate the opposite sex.
So this part honestly made me laugh because it's so obvious, but people still try to argue against it. Andrew Wilson just lays it out like it is. If you can only reproduce with the opposite sex, then guess what? There's only two sexes. I mean, come on. If there was a third one, who exactly would they be able to reproduce with? It just doesn't work. And the fact that Andrew Wilson keeps asking these real-world questions and getting no real answers, yeah, it shows how weak the other side's argument is. Like, no matter how many times they say spectrum, Andrew Wilson keeps bringing it back to real biology.
You can't ever impregnate somebody who's not that.
Yeah, but
So
then
there's
that
only
goes
two
into the
pathways.
just
That's
basic
it.
sex
All
and
right, we
gender
gotta
thing. So again, this
take a
is
chance
based
to
on like
respond.
the like identity part of it, where it's kind of like, see, I'm all about just respecting people, whatever they want to be called. Like, because I go back to when I was like in kindergarten, and the first time that somebody said, "Hi, my name's Timmy," and I didn't call them Jimmy, kind of thing. I'm just, it's kind of a simple respect issue.
Yeah, but you can't. Okay, and I think that's fair to say, but it's unfair to say. Well, I'm here to talk about the identity basis of this, which is fine, but then don't make claims about sex.
All right,
Don't
let's-
make.
At the end of the day, Andrew Wilson doesn't just bring opinions, he brings facts. Every time his opponents try to twist language or make gender sound like some floating cloud of feelings, Andrew Wilson brings it right back to reality. Two sexes, two developmental pathways, and no, wearing a dress or getting kicked by a horse doesn't make you a whole new category of human. This was a brutal logic beatdown, and honestly, Andrew Wilson made it look easy.